thank you for joining us today for another exclusive interview sponsored by Immovet. Help your horses reach their maximal potential with Immovet's line of natural homeopathic products. I'm your host today, Aurélien Dremian. Today, we have the pleasure of speaking with Chad Schumer, a renowned Bloodstock agent. We'll delve into the intricacies of selecting top-performing dirt horses, the vital physical and pedigree attributes, and the unique challenges of adapting horses for the Middle Eastern racing scene. Join us as Chad shares his expert insights and valuable advice on finding and nurturing the next dirt racing champion. Stay tuned for an enlightening conversation. So, Chad, great to have you here, first of all.
Hi. Nice to meet you, Aurelian.
Excellent. How are you doing?
Very well, thanks. Yourself?
Very good, very good. Thank you.
Yeah.
So, since the Middle East doesn't really have a thoroughbreding industry,
Sure.
doesn't have very high value dirt races, owners have to buy and bring in horses from around the world, I guess. And one of the first port of call is obviously the US. So is there a difference between horses bred to excel in the US on dirt surface versus the Middle East?
I don't think versus the Middle East. I think American dirt horses have, in fact, excelled in the Middle East. If you look through the vast majority of Dubai World Cup winners, major events in the Middle East and Saudi Arabia, even Bahrain, uh, almost all the winners on the dirt races are American breds. The Japanese have made some inroads recently, certainly, but for the most part, I would say American breds have completely dominated.
Oh my God, wow. And could you elaborate on the specific physical attributes, you look for in a horse bred to excel specifically on dirt?
Sure. American dirt horses tend to be bigger and perhaps stronger than their European counterparts. We look for a horse that's got size, I would say scope, which would include a strong hind leg, good bone, and correct conformation. Those are the types of horses that I think physically
Mhm.
excel better on dirt.
Okay, excellent. And how do you adapt your selection criteria based, on the specific characteristic of a particular dirt track, maybe length of stretch, banking, and so on?
Well, I think for the most part, you're looking for a dirt horse. Horses are individuals, very much like humans are individuals. And it's impossible to know if horse A or horse B is going to like a particular surface, maybe more than another dirt surface. So I think the key to it is to look for a specific dirt horse and then hope that that horse excels in whatever region or whatever racetrack that you've sent it to.
Fair enough. And then you can, I guess, easily change the circumstances, I guess.
Well, sure. I mean, if you have a horse that's won three in a row in Maidan, keep him at Maidan. You
Exactly.
know, he's excelling there. Why fix something that isn't broken, you know?
Of course, of course. A horse pedigree is very important when selecting a dirt horse. But could you tell us how important it is, perhaps, with an example or two?
Well, I think the American dirt horses have really excelled in Dubai. So, um, probably the quintessential American dirt horse was APND, and any progeny of APND sons, grandsons, great grandsons, as the case may be, I would be where I would start. There are many other sire lines, and I know we're going to discuss that probably later. But in particular, I think APND really embodied the American dirt horse. He was by Seattle Slew, an American Triple Crown winner, out of Ameribas Secretariat, an American Triple Crown winner. He came from a family of great depth that excelled particularly on dirt. So for me, he is the quintessential American dirt horse.
Oh, wow, excellent. I was about to ask you any specific bloodlines, more.
Yes, definitely.
Um,
Definitely. In America, as I mentioned, obviously APND
mhm.
and that line, Curlin, who was another tremendous American dirt horse, both his progeny and now the progeny of his sons, such as Good Magic, who has accelerated to become one of the best young stallions in America, already has a Kentucky Derby winner and a Belmont winner from very limited crops. I think also the Fabiano line, which is the Mr. Prospector line gave us Curlin through Smart Strike, but he almost created a separate line in Fabiano. And that's now manifesting in Candy Ride, specifically in America, whose son Gunrunner has become probably the best young stallion in America. So I think those particular lines is where we should all start in looking for the best dirt performers.
Great, great. Owners usually have their own superstition on, what may work well or not,
Indeed, they do.
two-year-old yearlings and so on. But supposing we are evaluating yearlings or, unproven horses,
Mhm.
what, well, you did mention what you were looking for, but in this aspect, what do you look for?
Well, I think you always start by looking for an athlete. And an athlete can come in all shapes and sizes. They can be tall, they can be short, they can be lighter, they can be stronger. But for me, I like to see a horse that's got a very loose walk, a very athletic mover. From there, we can examine their conformation. Some will be towed in, some will be towed out, what have you. You mentioned superstitions. I've worked with a lot of trainers. Some trainers will say, if a horse toes out, I'm out, not interested at all. Some will say, if it toes in, the same. So they have to rely on their experience and what's happened with them. And I think owners are the same. If an owner had a really good chestnut horse, he or she may be inclined to buy chestnut horses. There may not be a real I don't know, scientific method to that. But again, I think you have to go with what works for you. And look, horses are like dreams. Like, we buy these horses, we want to win races, we want the clients to do well, and it's a dream for them. And they should follow that dream. And if in that dream it's a chestnut horse or a bay horse, well, that's what we're here to do. I mean, I can give an owner or a client a list of horses I like at a sale, and that list will be, there'll be bay horses, there'll be chestnut horses, I don't differentiate. I'm looking for athletes, but I completely understand if they gravitate to a certain type of horse, a certain color of a horse, or a certain pedigree.
I'm sure I would imagine they're more likely to buy what they believe works for
For
them.
sure.
And,
Absolutely.
and that's fair,
Absolutely.
definitely.
Indeed. Indeed.
Are there any specific conformational traits that are more desirable for dirt horses compared to turf or sensitive tracks?
Well, as I said, I think a dirt horse has to have a strong hind leg.
Hmm.
And we look for a horse that has particularly a little bit more bone. Some of the European horses can be lighter framed, lighter boned horses. So I like a horse with more bone and a strong hind leg. In particular, for most American racing and racing in, say, Dubai, the racing is conducted counterclockwise. So in particular, we can't be forgiving in terms of conformation with their left foreleg because they're going to lead most of the race with their left foreleg. So as such, we need that leg to be very correct and can maybe be a little more forgiving on the right. Perhaps they toe out or toe in. But when all their weight is on that leg as they lead, we want the pressure of the weight of that horse to be as uniform coming down the leg as possible. That generally ensures soundness.
Okay, excellent. And what kind of running style would you prioritize when evaluating horses for racing on dirt?
Well, if we're looking at horses that have form, I think some speed matters.
Hmm.
But obviously, with yearlings or young horses, 2-year-olds even, we have no idea what their running style is going to be. I mean, I've seen horses show at the breeze ups like they have a lot of speed, and then they get to the racetrack and they're stone cold closers. So that's impossible to predict. But when you're looking at a horse that has form, in other words, he's had 5, 10 starts, and you're evaluating whether that horse would suit the Middle East. I think in general, some speed or at least some stalking speed makes a difference. Dirt horses don't tend to have the same turn of foot that turf horses have. So when you're watching these races in Europe, in particular, the big races, the Arc, the Derby, things like that, the winner tends to show a big burst of acceleration. And you just don't see that with dirt horses quite as much. They tend to grind. So if you have a horse that has some speed or some stalking ability and it's closer to the pace, closer to the front when they turn for home, I think that horse has a better chance to win.
Okay, wow. Would you say that the European horses tend to be less favorable for the Middle East then? You mentioned US.
No, I don't think that's fair.
No.
I think again, it's a horse by horse basis,
Okay.
and sometimes not as many European horses would have gone, so the data sample wouldn't be as big.
Hmm.
But I've noted in particular, like in Saudi Arabia, many European horses that you would think these pedigrees, complete turf, maybe even 12 furlong turf horses, stayers, and they seem to do really well there. So horses adapt like humans adapt, and they get there, and maybe they like that surface better. Maybe there's a different type of dirt, and it has this maybe some more spring to it, like a grass course, and they adapt better. But again, I would stress in Dubai in particular, American bred horses have far more success than the European counterparts.
Fair enough. Are there any specific, unmissable sale venues when you're looking for those under the radar dirt performers, hidden gems?
Well, I think when you're talking about purchasing horses, you have to start with, what is your purpose? And if they're racing in that part of the world, that's great. But if you're talking about yearling venues, that's one thing. If you're talking about 2-year-old breeze up venues, that's another. In America, I think the Fasig-Tipton Maryland sale, which is held in mid-May at
Mhm.
Timonium, is a really great place to start because it's the only major American breeze up sale that's actually held on a dirt surface. So the vast majority of our breeze ups are held at OBS in Ocala, which is a synthetic surface. And listen, plenty of horses have come out of that sale and been successful in the Middle East, so it may not matter. But I personally think to be able to see a horse breeze on dirt, a surface that's so similar to what they're going to be racing on, might give you a slightly better idea of what to expect.
That's fair. If a horse has some training history, whether that's a 2-year-old just starting out or an older horse, what
Sure.
aspects of their racing history, training regimen, would you be more or most interested in learning about for dirt racing?
Well, if I'm looking at 2-year-olds or even 3-year-olds to go to the Middle East, I look for consistency. So if they started for the first time, say in January or February of this year, I don't want to see big gaps in their training. Don't mind big gaps in their racing sometimes because there can be circumstances. They could have been entered in a race, could have been a bad storm that day, a very sloppy track. Maybe the owner or trainer decided this isn't the best spot for this horse today. So they look at maybe racing it somewhere else or shifting. So in terms of gaps in their racing, no worries. Gaps in their training, that will show you that the horse potentially has a problem. And we don't want that. So I look for consistency in that respect.
Okay. And given your years of experience, have you come across any unexpected factors that have made a significant impact on a horse success on dirt?
Well, I think, the French have the phrase je ne sais quoi. And sometimes horses have a certain je ne sais quoi. You can't quantify it. I think I don't know, in some ways, that's perhaps the best part of this business.
Hmm.
If it were always the best bred, most expensive horse that won everything, maybe it would be a little boring. I
Sure.
think this year in particular in Dubai, to see a horse like Kabir Khan come from America was a $13,000 yearling.
Wow.
Uh, Goes to Kazakhstan, is unbeaten there, or certainly nearly unbeaten there. Comes then to Dubai and wins a Group One. That horse has something to him.
Mhm.
And that's unquantifiable. And that, I think, in many ways, that's the best part of this industry. It is a great equalizer. Again, if it were just so simple as to go buy the best bred yearlings, we know where they are.
Mhm.
We know what these pedigrees are. We know what these horses look like physically. It's not hard. It's very easy to pick out $1 million yearling. Almost anyone can. It's much harder to buy a horse for like 20 grand that's any good.
For sure.
So yeah, so I think, we can't, there are people that do all kinds of measurements and scores and data analysis, and I think those are all great tools. But at the end of the day, it becomes about a will to win. They either have it or they don't. So I think that's what I mean by that. A certain unquantifiable characteristic of quality and determination that isn't necessarily readily apparent.
So at the end of the day, it's almost like the horse own personality, I would guess.
I would say so. I think that's a big part of it. Sometimes I'll stand there looking at a yearling and I'm looking in their eye, just looking at their demeanor. And you wouldn't necessarily think that would be a factor, but I think it is. And again, look, it's just my opinion. I don't have to be right, but there are many, many criteria we can use to select these horses. And I think that's a good one.
Great. And finally, on to the last question.
Sure.
If you had to, what one line parting advice would you give to someone, looking to buy a thoroughbred specifically for dirt racing success?
Well, I think in general, you should always try to buy the best quality you can for your budget. And as I said with the horse I mentioned that
Sure.
for a small budget that was successful, there are good horses at every level, and the data would easily back me up on that. So I think you try to buy the best horse you can for your budget. Specifically for the region, you want to buy a dirt horse, and so I think that starts in America. Now, if you're buying in Europe, there are breeze up sales in Europe. There are a lot of American breds at those breeze up sales. That might be a good place to start as well. But it's best to go with something that you know has been successful in the past. If there's some sort of track record, so to speak, that's, I think, a good way to go. So always try to buy the best quality that your budget allows.
Wow. It must be quite hard to also stick to your own budget when you see, maybe
It's
overly
nearly
expensive.
impossible. It's
Exactly.
nearly impossible because, again, this is not, we're not buying a TV or an oven. There's no real emotion involved in that. And with horses, there is emotion.
Mhm.
Sometimes you immediately feel a connection. And I've found myself even, paying more for a mare than I expected to pay because I got it in my head that I'm buying her. And I think a lot of people do that. So, within reason, of course. I mean, if you're bidding on a horse for 25,000, you think that's your budget. Now the horse is at 150, you're well past your budget. But
Yeah, of
sometimes if it's
course.
close and you get drawn in, that's the whole nature of the auction, I would say.
Excellent. Great. Well, thank you so much for the interview.
You're very welcome.
That was really nice. That was great.
Absolutely.
Enjoy the rest of your day.
You too.
Thank you
Thanks
so
very
much.
much.
All
Okay.
right.
Bye.
Bye-bye.